his joy in his life. And he has all of his friends. His friends don't know what a king don't know the king, don't know what it's like to be receiving this good news. But he can't celebrate it on his own, so he goes to the krechma, to the bar, and all of his friends, he says, the drinks are on me tonight. And everybody is celebrating. They're celebrating because they're drunk. And he's celebrating because his father is coming to get him. So the Baal Shem Tov says, when we celebrate on like a Shabbos, we're celebrating, the body is celebrating because it has cholent. It has a little whiskey. It has whatever it is, it feels good. But the soul is celebrating because on Shabbos we get the letter from above that says, I'm coming to take you back. So the Baal Shem Tov is like showing us the beginning of that, the other, the body that we see as the other, needs to be part of the celebration. In this story, there's still another. The people that surround the prince and his exiled state, community, are people who don't have a true understanding of the king. But the fact is that they're the friends of the prince, and they're happy with the prince. So this is the shift that the Baal Shem Tov will take even further than this, of the sanctity of the body, of the celebration of the body, not the denial, the opposite of denying the flesh, but transforming it by the realization that when you give it pleasure for something that the soul ultimately knows is related to a spiritual purpose, it will take part in that pleasure alongside with the soul. So, now this takes us a little further down the road. I'll tell you another story. The same idea. This time will be the wife of the Baal Shem Tov. Will be the featured person who recognizes this. It was on Simchas Torah, and the Hasidim were in the home of the Baal Shem Tov, and they were drinking and singing. And the Baal Shem Tov's wife said, there's not going to be enough wine left for Kiddush and Havdalah, like required things you need wine for.
Oh, okay. We've been there before.
Yeah. And the Baal Shem Tov kind of half-jokingly says, okay, so tell them that there's no more wine. Tell them. Go down and tell them, sorry, the party's over. No more alcohol. So she goes down to tell them. And when she goes down, the Chassidim are dancing, and she sees that above them dancing, she sees like the angels are a circle of like angels and like fire, and she realizes that their dancing is heavenly. So she goes and she brings them all the wine. It's, keeps the party going. The point Edkis brings down this story is to show that even sometimes the use of alcohol, and what he argues is that perhaps you have to say that at a certain point, the joy for some people who are not great intellectuals or great Kabbalists will be happening through physical joy, including a l'chaim. But that'll take me to the next thing, which is the idea and the thoughts of the Baal Shem Tov that there is no place where God isn't. Now, there are a variety of Kabbalistic thinkers, and the Bible itself says, Ein od milvado. There's nothing else. There's nothing else outside of Him. But the reality is that the Kabbalistic system, particularly the Lurianic Kabbalah, extensively talk about the separation between the various stages of the development of the olamot and the sfirot. There's levels of consciousness in which progressive removals, tzimtzumim, contractions, concealments of the divine light happens one after another, to the point that we are living in complete darkness and denial of divine existence in this physical world. Baal Shem Tov kind of just like flipped that over and said, no, it's all there. It's perhaps there are garments, but it's like you see, you know that the garment is God's garment. And once you know that, the garment isn't even a garment anymore. Once you know that it's just God playing hide and seek, there is no real hiddenness anymore, just that knowledge. So all of a sudden, this might be the underlying kind of key concept here, is this concept of the divinity in everything and everyone and everywhere. God is there. That becomes really the source. If that is the case, then God can be in the evil thought. God could be in the pleasures of the flesh. The problem is, if you took that, like I told that to somebody, when they're like, well, then I can eat shrimp. That's exactly the point of what the Vilna Gaon heard. The Vilna Gaon heard that I can eat shrimp. Take that idea all the way to its conclusion, is there is nothing separate from God. So there is no such thing as something that's not allowed, that's not kosher. Then why can't the man live with his sister? If it's all chesed, if it's all God's love. Well, the Baal Shem Tov would argue that what's allowed is allowed, and what isn't allowed. That we're still within the framework of Torah and mitzvos, that we say what you can derive pleasure from. That will be worked out more strongly with teachings of the Maggid and such teachers as the Alter Rebbe of Chabad. So explain why you still have law. But there was a antinomian, which means a idea, a concept here that seemed to be devaluing the law. Even if it wasn't in reality, it seemed dangerously close to saying, you don't need to keep the law. Now, where did that come out in reality? In the prayer service.
Probably Shabbat's feet, too.
Now, that's because you came late. If you would have been here early, you would have known that is one of the key ways of understanding what the Vilna Gaon was against, was he was afraid that this is just some extension. Because Shabtai Tzvi, one of the things that they did, one of their issues that they had, is that they had things that were essentially turning to antinomian tendencies that the Vilna Gaon feared that the Baal Shem Tov and his followers were aligned with.
Don't forget the Nathan of Gaza.
And at that time you had Jacob Frank, who was influenced by Shabtai Tzvi, kind of considered a later incarnation, who was wild with orgies, saying that you can discover God in the sparks that have fallen into the klipot. So again, the fear was that the Baal Shem Tov was some variation, maybe a less crazed version of a Jacob Frank or a Shabtai Tzvi. That was the fear. That was definitely one part of the fear. It was a mistake to think that, but there was a reason based on the past to be at least suspicious of that being the case. I'll tell you one of the areas in which Etkes makes a point that I don't agree with, which is Etkes then goes on to talk about the power of prayer. And the Baal Shem Tov's methodology for prayer was that he would enter into the prayer. Perhaps the most famous teaching of the Baal Shem Tov is the teaching on Parshas Noach. In fact, if you look at one of the best ways I feel to study the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov is through this 2-volume work called Baal Shem Tov ala Torah, or just Baal Shem Tov ala Torah Moadim. The Baal Shem Tov on the Torah, which is on the weekly Torah reading. And the biggest selection of any Parsha is in Parshas Noach. And the whole section is called Amud HaTfilah. Amud HaTfilah is the section on prayer. The particular selection has to do with the idea that God tells Noah, go enter into the ark and make the ark a second, third, a bottom, second, and third floor. Make a light or a special stone on top of the teva. Right? These ideas are reinterpreted by the Baal Shem Tov. The teva in Hebrew actually means also word. Teva means ark and means word. So enter into the ark is reread by the Baal Shem Tov, who does a lot of this kind of rereading, as enter into the word of prayer, as if it were something you can actually go into. And you're going to enter into it in the early stages. The first story, bottom floor, he says that there are 3 stages of kind of losing yourself to a spiritual reality that you can enter during the course of entering into the Word, during the course of prayer. So the first is Olamot, Malachim and Olamot, like souls, like the spiritual worlds. And then Nishamot, soul, the world of the souls. And then Elokut, and then divinity. Now the truth is, it's a play on a Lurianic teaching. This is like one of the examples when you read it, like, who's the Baal Shem Tov? He's just quoting, he's just taking other people's ideas. But actually, and Etkes points this out, it's kind of not the Lurianic construct of tefillah. Lurianic way of davening is the way of kavanot, some type of theurgy in which each word has a cheshbon, has a numeric value, called gematria, of coming up with some particular aspect, sphira, divine name that has a particular influence that relates to the other words. So you're combining words and letters to create this kind of, I don't want to call it manipulation, but this divine flow based on these intentions that you are fixing the worlds through these combinations. But to the Baal Shem Tov, it was rather than a kind of a very mindful, meditated, concentrated focus on what it is that you were doing. You were just entering into the prayer with ultimately the goal, even though the goal had to happen as a gift from above, so to speak, you may not be able to induce it, is that you would eventually lose, and the Baal Shem Tov does describe this, where you start losing more and more of your sensory perception of what's going on, to the point where you stop even hearing what you're saying. You're no longer in the realm of words. The words have become the purity of the soul. Until you eventually stop even existing. And that's when you get to the place of what we call elokut, divinity. You don't even exist there. You've merged. So the Baal Shem Tov has all of these teachings which are like, boom, like you are no longer just like climbing this ladder, which he does have a little bit of. You're just merging. You have lost your identity. You have merged into God. at that point. That's all for tonight.